Hey everyone, welcome. I'm Kelly Hoey, author of Build Your Dream Network, and I am so thrilled to be hanging out today at noon with my friend Patrick Sullivan, my new friend Jake Rosenfeld. They are the founders of Bonsai, a great platform that is democratizing access to insights and information, the necessary career insights, the whisper network, as I like to say, the things that some of us didn't have. We weren't born with silver spoons and platinum networks, and realize how much and how important mentorship is. So welcome, both of you.
Thanks for having us. Good to be here.
Thanks for having us, Kelly, and great to see you again.
Yeah, what did you figure out? It was what, 5th anniversary since we last
our last fireside chat. So it's been a while, but here we are back again.
Yeah, without the Guinness this time.
Yeah, we did a fireside chat at a really nice restaurant, back room with pints of Guinness.
Next time.
It's past noon Eastern, so I mean we can get into it.
I have my kegerator right there, so in my basement.
Oh my God, I love it. Okay, so I'm gonna actually, because Patrick, there's been lots of interviews with you, so I'm actually gonna pose the first question to Jake. Tell me what you're doing with Bonsai.
Cool. So Bonsai is a platform for career advice. Effectively, we kind of came together as a company and identified a number of pain points out there in the universe of career success, in the universe of education. And we determined what most of us intuitively know, and that is that a lot of times it's not necessarily what you know, but it is, in fact, who you know. So essentially what we did was we created a marketplace for individuals seeking career advice to get the expertise of individuals that are willing and able to actually share the advice based on the experience they've developed throughout their professional lives. So we function very much like a marketplace, similar to Airbnb or Lyft or Uber, but instead of riders and drivers, essentially we have advice seekers and advice givers. And today our advice seekers are mostly college students and recent graduates, and our advice givers are professionals, executives throughout a ton of different industries, mostly focused on technology, finance, media, and sort of the universe of startups.
Cool. Patrick, all right, you've had two companies. Well, I know of two companies with two exits. RightsFlow to YouTube, Source3 to Facebook. Okay, first of all, we are going to get in later. Why the heck you're building another company? Has your wife not wanted to kill you on this yet?
Yeah. I think the wife wanting to kill is definitely there almost every day. But I have this real high interest in building, and I've been very fortunate to be building something with someone like Jake, who's been unbelievable, partner, friend, and mentor-mentee relationship. And I was literally sitting here on my lake. I'm in North Carolina, and I was fishing, and this opportunity to work with Jake, this opportunity to build something in the network accessibility space. I said I'd be the biggest fool if I didn't do this. And this is kind of first one, you need to do. The first one you want. The second one I want to do. This one I have to do. And it's sort of very much in the wheelhouse of building a product around what I think is my experiences around network accessibility and how I've built this input-output network system in my professional career. And once Jake and I had that aha moment with the team and the folks, I said, we want to build something, and we have to build something, I should say. And Bonsai came to fruition. I'm not that old. And, Jake being the youngin was willing to work with the old guy, but it was definitely something that I felt was needed and necessary in the marketplace. And the common feedback we got from the professional networks, like, I do this all day long. If there was a marketplace to simplify, streamline, create accessibility on a give advice, get advice market, this was a no-brainer. We did a lot of testing around it before we launched the product. We did about 100 use cases where we analyzed both the people seeking advice, giving advice. We did, we went on campus, colleges. We really tried to learn about what are the needs of the marketplace. But, this one is pure enjoyment. It's not that difficult. The other systems we built, for Facebook and Google, very complex back-end enterprise systems where, people like I don't really get what you do. And I, try to simplify. It's like when you see music and video on YouTube or Facebook, where the back end identifies the copyright and the ownership and the monetization component. And people are like, what? This one's like, we're a marketplace for a network. People are like, I get it. So it's a little easier, but I'm still married.
Still there. That's the summary.
Yeah, well, but I was like, part of this is like, and you've answered that. It's like, I really wanted to know what, because you've really shared in other interviews, and congratulations, both of you, on your new infusion of capital. But why this company and why now? Like, I think, as we were chatting before we jumped on, for all of us, networks and relationships have been really important for our own careers. Is there a pivotal moment that you can think of in your own life, Jake, that we were like, yeah, this changed everything. Like, this person shed a light on the way things work, and wow, my career was unlocked.
Totally. I mean, I don't know if I'll identify a single moment in response to your question, but I think what's super interesting about Patrick and myself working together is the juxtaposition of kind of like how we both came up. And for me, I was fortunate to have been raised very close to Manhattan and went to a wonderful university at the University of Michigan. And I was exposed to really great, parents of friends and uncles of friends who were working at Goldman Sachs and, across these super fancy companies. So for me, the reality of achieving that career success, it was always within reach, right? And it was always in my brain. I think after learning about how the rest of the world works, as I grew older, and frankly, like, I think I'll give some credit to my time spent in the Midwest in Michigan. You start learning, like, damn, I was privileged, and you get brought up middle class, and that's privilege as hell. Just understanding mentally that, man, one day I could belong in that Goldman Sachs office or that JP Morgan office or that Google office. As we began to, meet more and more people and understand the mentality of more and more people, that's not a given. Picturing yourself walking through the halls of Google, eating free sushi for lunch. A lot of people and a lot of individuals that we've met, particularly while building Bonsai, they're intimidated by that. They don't necessarily see themselves in that place. So, as we've been ideating on what this product is over the last, few months to a year, we said to ourselves, both, I think, subconsciously and then inevitably, pretty transparently and out loud, we need to do something that pulls the curtain back and makes it possible for everyone to kind of dream and achieve, the best and become the best version of themselves. So I think almost having that fortune early on, began to prompt me to learn about just how many opportunities were out there, and we want to really democratize that knowledge and that imagination across the game.
Well, I think that's a huge aha moment to realize that having access was this privilege.
Absolutely.
I grew up middle. I like to say the ultimate kind of. I'm going to say, talk about privilege. Middle class, because I think that is a privilege now. Middle class in Canada, like super accessible to schools and stuff, but very much brought up in this very shuttered of, here were acceptable careers, here's what you could do, here's what you could be. And wasn't until sort of after law school and moving to Toronto realized, like, oh my God, like, how I thought I had, a bigger worldview, but I was more like one of those horses in Central Park with the little blinders on. And I always think of a moment with a mentor who just completely revealed to me, like how it's because I was practicing banking and insolvency law when I was in Toronto. He completely revealed to me how the network worked. And if I wanted to do that area of law, this is what I needed to do. And it was like one of those like epiphanies, like kind of the Wizard of Oz, pull back the curtain. And then I could make a career choice and decisions with real clarity, knowing that this is what I needed to do to succeed, as opposed to, just head down doing the good work and all this. So, all right.
Totally.
And we both know Patrick's got a way different story than our little middle class little story on networks and stuff. But,
right.
Patrick.
So well, very blessed. I had probably a different upbringing in the Bronx in the 70s and 80s, where I grew up in Wakefield, pretty hardcore neighborhood, crack infested, every murder, every retail store, bad. But it was a great experience because you learned the art of the hustle, because no one would ever give you money. We started working at 5. So I just learned about the value of the dollar, how to set up systems. I took lemonade stands to the next level. I had groups of teams of people on the top of the block, on the avenue, selling corners. We owned 2 corners. We'd all, at the end, we'd take the money. I managed it. We'd throw a big party. At that very early age, I was working and was learning how the art of the hustle. Fast forward throughout my career, my dad was, worked for the transit authority, very local, community. Your ratio of your knowledge and your network was probably your block and a few extensions when you got into the school. So no one had ever understood the value. We always look back at Chase Bank, where we played hockey on the top of the block. We only knew that as the bank. We probably thought that was one business called Chase, and that was it. We didn't realize it was a whole corporation and conglomerate. My dad didn't have that knowledge to bring, or the neighborhood didn't have that. But eventually, through college and going to New Paltz, I learned a lot about music and business, and then eventually I got my I call it a very great opportunity. I got a scholarship to NYU and got a teaching fellowship as well. So I had a full ride, and it was there that I always use this as an example. I was taking a third of my coursework was at Stern School of Business, and I was taking a course called Managing and Organizational Behavior. And I always like to summarize it's like teaching how to manipulate outcomes. And I always called it. I learned like the skill of predictive guessing. But the one thing that I always remember being in that class, it was all investment bankers and lawyers, and that one class, like the one thing I know I have is I could probably rob every one of these students in the class. I would guarantee I could probably rob them in some way, whether it was their wallet or their minds. And it was in that class I started to frame, like, what are my strengths? What are my skills? What am I good at? What am I bad at? And it was really an amazing experience, that course and that professor at the time. And out of that, I really started to invest in the art of networking and studying that as a skill. And back then, Kelly, I'm sure, I had a notepad. That was my business card calling. I would write people's names and phone numbers. I took it very seriously. And I started then teaching about networking to the students, because part of my job was to run a weekly class around, all things NYU and networking, in addition to teaching there. So I started to really start building a network, because I knew the value of what would be achieved by having that. I had an NYU business card that said teaching fellow. So then I went around and started handing it out, and I felt, I was networking, and I've always built a, physical network platform in my, gather all my business cards, and then eventually with technology, I was able to organize that. So networking being very important and powerful for me, and really studying it as an art form and a science. And, sort of my first moment on LinkedIn was like, wow, I have the ability to launch my company publicly, RightsFlow, to this wild new audience. And I wrote everyone about the company. Even when we just started, we had not really fully baked what the company was going to become, and just used the power of network. And a lot of the principles that you teach and put in your book, and you're a philosopher around, I started to understand and really, build that critical thinking early. And I think the key takeaway, one of the things that I think we as a society and academia does poorly, is not start building in that network accessibility at day one, which is at the first moment they start their programmatic teaching in college, degree programs. They got to start to think, because it will help them craft the outcome, which is to get a career and a job when you graduate. But I think a lot of times they don't meet and don't understand that power. And when I worked at NYU, as an example, and still to this day, it was a book driven. You go in and it's like the internet already existed, and there was no like push of this information around jobs. But I think we need to do a better job. And that's part of the reason why we created Bonsai, to simplify that network accessibility.
I mean, so much in there that I want to unpack. But, one of the things that's like so nailing for me is, like, so often when I'm asked to speak, with something related to my book, And what, it's really focused on building the dream network, not, as I like to jokingly say, making networking a dream, but like, how do you have this community of people around your life and career who are going to, support me? But people always have networking questions, and they always want to know, like, what's the perfect icebreaker, and what's, like, stuff that I want to, light my hair on fire. But they always want to know how they can enter into a conversation. And what I always say to people, I say, stop. Like, I look, if it's an audience, I'm like, how are we pulling people into conversations? How are those of us who already have networks, how are we being inclusive and bringing other people in? How are we looking around and saying, right, who's not here at the table, and how can I, rather than wringing my hands that I'm not speaking in front of a diverse audience and everyone's like, oh, it's too bad. Who are you, like, looking around and pulling into and impacting because of your connections?
Totally. Yeah, I think part of it, right? Everything that we've already discussed in the past 15 minutes relates to seeing the good that can come from doing exactly what you just referenced, pulling others in. And I think a lot of that is really easy to wrap your head around when you have had other individuals who have helped you unlock the access. You need to consciously make a decision. Hey, there have been 5, 10, 100 people out there that gave me the opportunity when I was just the kid from Long Island, promoting nightclubs before I was even 21. And like, how do you necessarily put yourself out there to accept that next generation, right? And also to consciously say, who's the person in the vast audience that could really use this lift as well. Right. I think that's so key. And I think part of the way we're crafting Bonsai is not necessarily saying to our advice givers, hey, do the right thing and coach the next generation of students, next generation of professionals, next generation of leaders. We want it to be almost like this flowing kind of circle of value, because we think there's a ton of value for bringing other people up alongside with you. And if people are able to,
well, think about Patrick, like right now, like where's your next opportunity going to come from? People have such an outdated notion of network and networking. They're thinking like some honcho in a corner office is going to give you the next opportunity. Whereas these days it could be someone younger than you. Totally. Like your next intern could be creating the next company, and the two of you are going to be going, Yahoo! We're going to be able to get in there with the first round of money and make a mint off this kid because she's got an amazing idea. Yahoo! Glad we hired her. We don't know where our next opportunities are going to come from. So this notion, like I totally, this two-way, it has to be two-way. And I just think too many people that don't have your aha moment, Jake, of, oh shit, like I was really lucky. I was in these networks. Or you could say we cling to the hero's journey of people said, I made it on my own. And we all know that's just such BS.
Yep. It's so damn true. I think that's like the thing that Patrick and I share, although our backgrounds are different, is that we both are self-aware enough and present enough to understand that we have benefited from so many people that came before us, mentors in business, educators, whatever it might be. And that is such a powerful thing to embrace, right? Because then you're in that mindset of, okay, who's next?
Yeah. But also, Patrick, I'm pulling you in on this. So I know that I suspect you met Jake when you had Source 3 and he was one of the VCs.
Yes.
Yeah. So what was it when you were like, all right, because so many people don't think about a VC relationship as anything more than, an ATM, and they're going to give you some cash and sit on your board meetings and, bitch about the cap table. What was it that you saw in Jake that you were like, okay, this is someone I would take a call from?
I'm going to
be honest. Well,
I was going to let Jake tell the story because I think it's funnier from you, and then I'll piggyback on how we first met. In addition,
love that idea. Actually, this is great. So I worked for a fund called Correlation Ventures, West Coast based firm. So about 12, smallish shop, manages almost 400 million bucks, but from a headcount perspective, smallish shop. So about 10 people work there. I was the only employee in New York. So I kind of was brought on to run the New York presence of the firm. I don't know why they hired a 25-year-old to do that, but they did, and God bless them for it. So I think probably a month or two before I joined the firm, Correlation had invested in Source 3, Patrick's last company, in the seed round. And I had been asked maybe 2 months into my job by a friend of mine who was organizing a pretty big event here in Manhattan to do a panel where I interviewed an entrepreneur, a successful entrepreneur, not like a brand spanking new entrepreneur, successful, proven entrepreneur, about what he or she thought about the future of startup financing. And I didn't have a crazy robust network at the time. I had kind of my core network, but as far as Correlation's network had reflected itself on me, I didn't really know a lot of the portfolio company CEOs. So I asked my at the time, my managing director, Trevor, I said, hey, Trevor, who's a great New York-based entrepreneur who can maybe do this interview? And he put me in touch with a few people who Correlation had invested in. And the conversations went like this. Hey, I'm the new guy at Correlation, would love to interview on this panel. And the other person would say, sounds awesome. When is it? And I'd say, it's Saturday, June XYZ. And at that moment, every single person would be like, oh, Saturday during the summer in New York City? I'm good. Thanks, man. But I'll see you around. The person that was the most open and welcoming about it was Patrick. So I got in touch with Patrick. I said, hey, I'm doing this panel. It's Saturday. Patrick was like, yeah, I got this house in the suburbs and I'm probably throwing a party, but screw it. I'll do the panel. You never know where a relationship like this will go. And that's where I first met him. I actually first met him right around that time in that context of doing the panel together. And I think that's, by the way, the magic of like a person like Patrick being so just open and willing to embrace something that maybe he didn't even want to do at the time. It just was like, he's like, yeah, I didn't want to do that at the time. I'll let him kind of finish it, but like long story short, that's how we became close.
But also too, the both of you are hitting on something here. It's like the saying yes, and sometimes like as you said, being a 25-year-old and being offered a job and going, why would they do that? But you didn't go, oh shit, I'm 25. I don't know anything about this. I don't have the networks. You said yes, and Patrick, you were a nut. You said yes to a panel on a Saturday in the summer, and your wife is still married to you. Anyway.
It's the key to figuring out in a balanced mindset of like where your opportunities lie. And I did it more, for a commitment to Correlation as an investor, and then a commitment to Jake. I wouldn't break. I did wake up that Saturday and I had a lot of people at my house. I think it was the kid's birthday party, and we had caterers coming and all the. And I said to my wife, I got to do this, and it's like an hour and 20-minute drive from where, and I had to park it and all this stuff. And I said, but what came out of it, obviously I enjoyed it. I got the prompting of meeting Jake on a panel, which was really entertaining. I remember it was entertaining conversation that we had, and I think it was two-way benefit, having the conversation. But that eventually when we got acquired by Facebook, Jake had reached out and said, hey man, I think we actually had a lunch, and he was like, I'm really looking at a new next adventure. Have you ever thought about doing a startup? Not knowing what we would do, but Jake was very persistent and consistently followed up while I was there, to the point where we were ideating on an idea. It was in a different category, different space in healthcare, but we really didn't know. I didn't have that. And then we started to snowball into like 100 miles an hour. And then I was like, whoa, wait, stop, and let's figure it out. And, then Jake, he came over to my house for dinner. One of the things that are very important to me when you want to get to know someone, you have dinner with them. Jake came over, and I always remember he bought an incredible bottle of wine, and I was like, wow, this kid's smart. Yeah. he knew I like wine, and he bought a great bottle of wine. And my wife and I think we had I forget the meal. It was, my wife cooked. She's an amazing cook. And then we just kind of kept ideating. And then it came to the point where I had no idea what we were going to do next. And Jake was like, let's do something. And I'm like, this guy is crazy. But, I will say in my career, he's at the top of his game, and, very, his demeanor, his business. So I'm very blessed, but, it all came out of that moment where we met on that panel. And it was, willing to try something at the time that I felt I didn't really want to do. But, you got to see where things go. And I think that's part of networking is like, I use the, planting your seeds, early, and starting the conversations early enough that you don't know where it will go one day, but you have to do that. And I think that was like the seed beginnings where we connected and we were able to like grow together into starting a company, which is an amazing thing.
Yeah. If you don't look at this as planting seeds, then you leave networking in that horrible paradigm of a transaction. Like, what can you do for me right now? Which is, that's why people only show up to network when, the verb of networking, they only show up and do that when they're needing a job or they're in some sort of a crisis, versus how are you constantly building relationships so that people want to help you? Jake, you had something to say.
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head. I agree completely. I think I will say something, and when you're kind of trained as a VC, if you will, and I was on the operator side before VC, and I'd started a company when I was younger, and then joined an early team prior to joining Correlation on the investor side. But you're kind of trained to VCs invest super, super early. It's likely before revenue's earned. It's likely potentially before even a product's been launched, and sometimes it's before an idea has really formed. So you begin to like try to at least develop some sort of pattern recognition in terms of people, and try to read people and understand people's strengths. And I think part of the reason that drew me to Patrick, when I kind of put a stake in the ground and was like, this investing thing's really fun and it's cushy and it's good work-life balance and I get paid a lot to do it, but I really want to start a company. And I need a great partner. I think the reason I kind of was persistent in pursuing Patrick while we were figuring out what the hell to do, period, was that I identified in him, like, he's got that tenacity and that kind of hint of craziness that you need to be a successful entrepreneur.
Right.
And I think just in life, man, when you're pursuing a significant other or a friend or a business partner or someone to work on your journey with you after a company's established already, to be able to identify the qualities of that person, just in terms of his or her humanity and what, the DNA that flows through, that's such a key quality. And it's something we're all programmed to be able to do. I want
to ask the two of you on this, because there's something when Patrick, you raised before in terms of Jake's persistence. Now, Jake, you've brought it up again, but you've also hit sort of like, I want to say it's like the Venn diagram, like, the idea of, yes, I can, because there's being persistent in going after someone, which is just annoying as hell. But then it's the difference of when you see something in the other person, of something like you are recognizing that you may be suggesting something in their interest that might pique their curiosity or may help them with their own venture, that actually the persistence pays off. Can you guys like talk about why he was persistent and it wasn't like a yappy Pekingese that you wanted to like strangle? Sorry, and Pekingese owners, but I just kind of
I'm going to take this one first. Jake definitely saw the connection earlier than I did in the partnership, which is a true partnership. To the point, I looked at my wife and said, I think he's stalking me, but very elegantly. And I almost was like, Jake, I don't know what we're going to do. I don't think we're going to do anything. And he was like, great, let's keep the conversation going. And he was very artful. And then, because we had never really worked together in an environment, I was very of the mindset I need to know the people for a longer period of time, so we kind of started to do speed dating in a way. Then we started doing little projects together, and then that aha moment. And I had I was using a dear friend of mine who's an investor in the company, and he's a mentor to me. And I was bouncing. I was like, we had two different opinions because he didn't know Jake either. So, but the great thing about getting to know someone quickly is if you're willing to start connecting with each other. I like the word building a relationship is part of connecting, was emotional, project-based or experience-based, obviously, but we started to connect with each other. And then the deeper we got into more projects and starting the company, and then we're like, wow, this is like a lot of his strengths that he has, I'm aligned with. My weaknesses he overcame. We kind of very agreeable to, like, he's going to run finances, and I don't, don't let me near finances, because I will embezzle the money and buy yachts and buy planes, buy more houses. I'm into real estate buying and car buying.
Shout out to all our investors who might have had their money embezzled.
Yeah. I only kid around with that, but we kind of aligned on the basic principles, and we also were willing to do the work, and it's like, we need to get it done mentality, and in the smartest way. And it became very aligned. But it was definitely, thankfully, Jake's initiative to see the connection, to see, like, no matter what we do together, two people that like each other, get along, and we're willing to figure out complex problems. We think what we're doing is, we think, is almost a complex problem. It was how we really got to know each other. And thankfully to this day, he's family, and he changed his name for that Irish Echo article to O Rosenfeld.
Yeah, true story. Or at least I offered. They didn't take me up on it. No, that's it. That's the key. It's like balancing each other's strengths and weaknesses. And I think you hear the cheesy, like, opposites attract type thing, always. I think it's so real. I think it could be the case for partnerships, whether it's, personal or professional. And I think it could be the case for mentor-mentee relationships that blossom into kind of equal playing field relationships at some point in time as well. So that's super key, is just to see where you can add value. And I tell this to folks who maybe are in high school or college, or just graduating college, and they want to get a job in some kind of like smaller industry that's super competitive. And I'll just use venture capital as an example, because there's not a lot of supply of jobs, but there's a lot of demand for the jobs, because it's a sexy, kind of glorified industry.
Let's stress it. Look sexy and quite glorified, as opposed to being the truth. Yes.
Very, very true. Exactly. It's glorified and looks sexy for sure. And I think the key is, like, man, when you meet a firm or a VC and you want to work for her, come to that meeting, come to that phone call with something valuable. It could be a little nugget of information. It could be hey, have you seen this startup? It was started on my college campus. You probably haven't seen it because it's run by this 20-year-old kid on my campus. I can make an introduction. I think it falls right in your investment thesis because of X, Y, and Z. If you kick something off with value, right there, you're showing essentially, like, hey, I could fill this gap that you didn't know you had. And all of a sudden you're valuable to that person, and vice versa. So it's super important. Maybe what I'm describing is a little bit transactional, to use your word, Kelly.
But it's like when people say to me, well, I think that people think of like business card handling, that kind of transactional one-off kind of stuff. Whereas, someone said yesterday in something I was doing, they're like, well, this is a bit of a self-interested. And I'm like, hold on a minute. We all are self-interested. But you got to take in the self-interest of someone else. And that's where the magic happens. Your interest was in starting a company with Patrick. You just had to make him see that it was his interest. You had to reveal to him that it was in his interest. He might have not had that. He wanted to be out on his lake fishing. No, not so much. Not so much. You know what? Back to bonsai for just because let's talk bonsai. One of the things I wanted to, so it's one-on-one mentoring model. You've got colleges, you've got students using it. It's a paid model. Okay. What are some of the ways we can even democratize it further? Like, this is maybe my sort of like, all right, schools and foundations and organizations, because I'm sure at this time for a lot of people, there's massive, massive need and they don't have the money. How can we democratize this further? What are some of the things you guys are talking about? And this may be our PSA for some foundations and organizations and colleges to get on bonsai.
Yeah, we are doing pro bono. So we have brought coaches on who've signed up, specifically, in particular me. I'm doing pro bono sessions, and a lot of the coaches. We did do a program with CUNY's, one of CUNY's schools. So we offered it to one of their colleges for free. We launched that, and we're actually doing it now. So it's pretty exciting. We are putting together, we've been approached by people that want to invest in giving pro bono sessions. So we're actually setting up a foundation as a company separate from Bonsai to help facilitate that. We are, a for-profit company. We have to pay coaches, we have to pay to operate the company. So it's something as a company we have chosen to do. But we are thinking in ways that we can do that, and having a foundation arm of Bonsai is one way to accept proceeds to help facilitate people that need it. And in addition, coaches that we are signing up are asking to waive their fees, which is amazing. And we're all doing that as well as a company. So the team at Bonsai is doing pro bono sessions as well.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with someone paying something, like if they were paying the equivalent of a cup, whatever was like your baseline cost to run a company. Like, here's what, if they wanted to pick my brain over coffee at Starbucks, it would cost them $10 or $12. So
Kelly, love that. No, seriously, our head of product named Andres, he says the same thing. When a advice giver says to us, hey, I don't know what to charge, a college student for my time. Andres says, think of it like he or she buying you a cup of coffee, to pick your brain on your industry. Boom. Like, that's it. That if that's what you're comfortable doing, great. So great. I love that analogy that you just organically drew.
Right.
And then, go ahead. To Patrick's point, we've thought about this a lot for sure. And we've recruited folks to to give advice for free. And we're also in talks with a handful of corporations who have expressed interest in kind of sponsoring or subsidizing some sessions for more underserved consumers out there using our platform, who don't necessarily have the disposable income or the liquidity to pay for these sessions ad hoc, or if there's a particular advice giver out there who has a super high price for whatever reason, potentially there are corporate partners of ours that are able to foot the bill for that particular session.
Right.
So we're working on that actively.
Yeah, and you think of it too, like some of the big conferences that are canceled or in jeopardy, which were big ones for recruiting. Like, why wouldn't a company say, all right, I'm going to take an example. I don't know if Grace Hopper celebration is going to happen, but what if I sponsored these sessions on Bonsai, and if you were a woman in tech from any school in the US, you can come on and request a session with one of our folks. Yeah, I'll just throw that business idea out there live off the cuff.
I like it.
And I'm going to say this publicly right now. I'll email you guys afterwards. I've been talking to tons of college students recently about networking and the relationships they need and what they need to be doing. So I, tested your beta. Let's make sure I get on the platform, and I will happily, I want to say, do some pro bono at this time to help college students in particular. So
awesome. I love that.
Happily do that. I'm going to say if there's anything else. Is there anything we haven't touched on that you guys wanted to talk about?
I mean, you're a pretty good question asker. I think we covered a lot. I think between Patrick and myself, one thing we are, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's also not necessarily a good thing. We like talking. So we can get, you asked like a simple question and we both just went off to the races. So anything, yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, I think the audience. I think again, reaffirming that we need to know it's a who economy, human capital, social capital, all these terminologies that are used for buzzwords. But the folks who need the network accessibility, they have to start thinking about it way earlier. We have to do a better job at creating an approach that's just not a message board like LinkedIn is, or a profile board, and doesn't really allow people into networks. So we have to reimagine that. And I think that, where we see ourselves like in 5 years, I'd love to build this in programmatic into any education, whether it's traditional or non-traditional, online, that people start thinking about the network accessibility, and it'll help them frame their outcomes. It'll help them, like if you think about the design your life principles as you're designing your career, designing your life, you'll be able to think about what things I should need to know now that I didn't know then. And it's very critical, important, where we're career coaching, a student who went to a major university and got a degree for $250,000 in music engineering. And anybody in the music industry knows you don't learn how to engineer by going to a big university to get a degree. It's like learning how to paint and paint. You get in the studio, you start painting, and that doesn't cost money, capital, in an intense $250,000 value. So, and if that person's now scratching their head, goes, if only I knew then what I know now, I would not have chosen this industry. So now they're going to corporate finance. They have to go to another degree in another college. And so, our whole goal with Bonsai is to sort of prompt I need to know now. Maybe it's good to start talking to Kelly, Hoey, talk to Jake Rosenfeld as a VC entrepreneur. Maybe I'll see what I don't like about that industry earlier to help design how do I get to become Jake one day. And could Jake talk to me today versus after I've graduated and I'm sitting there going, I need a job. And now is the time to talk to Jake. And I realized I don't like venture capital. I like public relations in media. And so we're trying to just sort of bring a whole reverse engineer the process early, day one, to get to your outcomes when you graduate. That this is where you needed to go, and you've done enough sessions of informational training and learnings and through Bonsai that you get there sooner in your thinking and your capital access point to the networks.
Yeah, we call it like rapid prototyping. If you could essentially like discover what you love and what you hate as early as possible, you're in a kick-ass position, right? So that rapid prototyping of, man, I just had a session with someone who works in investment banking, and based on that 30 minutes, I don't necessarily want to talk to that person again, and I don't necessarily want to apply to be an investment banker. Move on. Boom.
Well, I know why I'm doing it, and I'm doing it for these reasons, not these reasons.
Right. True.
Right. Like you go in there with a different sense of control and clarity. I was going to say, listening to you guys talk, and I'm like grimacing and smiling away because you speak my language. When the idea of like what's the roadmap? It's why I wrote my book, as Patrick knows, of kind of going backwards of how people got from A to B, and what was, the theme of the networks and the personal investment that they needed to do. But one of the things I was thinking of when you say like the who you know, as they say in the book, it's not who you know or what you know, it's who knows what you know. And how we now bring this of, right, if you've got the knowledge, but you don't have the network, or if you got the network when you don't have any knowledge, well,
Right.
But someone discovers that you've got this great knowledge and they've like unearthed this gem of a person, like how, as me as a mentor, like how it benefits my network to bring someone forward that they've never heard of. That's fantastic, right?
Totally.
As someone sort of sits there as that connector in all of this. I also want to leave you guys with one other, because this whole idea of getting people to figure this out earlier. One time on the book tour, because I think you both love the story, this guy came up to me and he'd been laid off. It was in his 40s. And he said, here's my story, Kelly. He said, I got laid off. Company was like, we're sorry, we're downsizing. And this was 2 or 3 years ago, downsizing. Take all the time you need to clean out your office. But, the guy's like, no, don't worry. Walked into his office. Patrick, this goes back to, our age and remembering things. Grabs his Rolodex. For those who remember those. Yeah. He grabs his Rolodex. He grabs his coat. And he's like, see ya. And he said to me, Kelly, he said, I don't know what my next job is, but I have relationships. So that's all I needed to take is I take my relationships. And I think that's one of those things people forget. Like if you have relationships, you can navigate that career and professional uncertainty.
Totally.
Yeah, I think that, and we acquired all those inputs and those relationships over a career. when we did our testing with the student learners, in particular on CUNY as a campus, a lot of these New York City students and kids, not kids, but some adults, just don't have that framework and thinking and a network of alumni from a great college. Their parents went to a great college, and that translates to Michigan, to a career at JP Morgan Chase. So it's either we're going to bring it to them, or they're going to try to figure it out. Trying to figure out is very difficult, and making those connections, or seeing people who similar backgrounds to them. And so we believe that there is the ability to bring the network to them earlier, and obviously through partnerships and cooperations with, whether it's through CUNY or school. So we have to bring them, and maybe can change that outcome, because that's kind of like the premise behind why we built Bonsai. These New York City CUNY students all have access to the same job listings, but when they go through these online application process, the algorithms of these big companies are preventing them. They don't match. And so what if we could do the matchmaking earlier, at least from the network thinking and a network access to information that helps explore, I want to work at Google one day, and how to get there. And we did this exercise with CUNY students who wanted to work at CUNY, and just comparing that person with a CUNY to a Google employee helped them understand the Google application process, and actually changed how they interviewed and got into interviews differently by being prompted. And that's kind of like the openness of what we want to achieve is, I want to be an entrepreneur. The little things of advice I may be able to give to someone could change, like how they structure, their formation of their company, how they hire principals, hire people smarter than you, and little things that lessons we've learned and acquired over the years. But our hope is to bring it way earlier, way sooner to, individuals, and, make that connection earlier to the career path.
Yeah, and I think it's even like it's also a step earlier than learning, how to tweak your resume for that job at Google, or how to interview, how to explain why you chose this major. For a lot of the students we had met before we had kind of a fully baked idea of what our product would be, particularly students within City University of New York, CUNY, which is the largest urban campus in the country, amazing institution. A lot of those students would tell us they actually just wouldn't apply to a Google, because again, they felt like it was just such a crazy far reach, and they felt like they didn't belong. And Google, I'll just use Google as an example, because we've dropped the name a few times. They do some amazing stuff with the community here in New York, and I'm sure they do it across the world, their various offices. Some of what they do is they'll give tours of the office. CUNY student comes in, has some lunch, meets with a product manager, understands what product management is all about, meets with engineering department, meets with someone who's in marketing. And the whole premise there, the whole value there is, let's see what a day in the life is like, so that it becomes reachable and achievable. And it's something you could picture yourself doing, because if you can't picture yourself doing it, you'll never achieve it. And it's so important. So our hypothesis is that if we can bring someone via a video chat, right, online, who's done some amazing things that are relevant to the person looking to learn about the thing over here, and connect the two of them through technology, this person over here who's looking to learn will be far more prepared, and also just psychologically ready to take on that challenge to achieve the thing. So
that getting those blinders a little more open, a little more open. Well, this has been phenomenal, guys. I am so deeply appreciative of you taking the time to talk about Bonsai. Again, congratulations on that fresh round of funding. Congratulations, Jake, for being persistent. Patrick, I always love to see the stuff that you're up to, because, what's better than like a crazy founder, changing the world? I mean, there we go. So that's all amazing, and glad that you and your family are healthy and well. And we miss you having you here permanently in New York, but we'll forgive you for relocating. We'll forgive you for that. Expanding our network by having you down in North Carolina. So that's a wrap for our on-air live chat, and I'm going to follow up with you guys on coming and giving some pro bono time over on Bonsai. I look forward to it.
All right, looking forward to it too.
All right,
Thank
thanks.
you, Kelly.